All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. We got a jam-packed show for you today. NBA Media Day was Monday, and we've assembled quotes from 8 different teams that we're going to bounce around the league, talk a little bit about some of the stuff we heard in the season opening press conferences. And then at the tail end of the show, we're continuing our season preview series, power ranking style, with number 7, the Minnesota Timberwolves. So deep dive on the Timberwolves, and then 8 additional teams in Media Day quotes off the top. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Don't forget it's also helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. And last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in the YouTube comments. We will be doing a mailbag on Friday that centers around the Media Day, all of the quotes and stuff that were floating around from Media Day. So if you have anything related to a specific quote that you saw that you thought was interesting, or maybe just some notes from the first few days of training camp, drop them in the comments and we'll get to those on Friday. And then last but not least, before we get started, I want to talk to you guys about Game Time. We're heading into like the golden era of live sports because we've got the Major League Baseball playoffs that just started yesterday. The NBA season starts with preseason games on Friday. The NFL is in full swing right now. College football is in full swing right now. Obviously, we still have concerts and comedy shows all around the country. This is where I want to talk to you guys about Game Time, an excellent ticket buying experience. I've personally used them several times over the course of the past couple of years and routinely have gotten the best deal shopping on that specific app. It's just a great experience. They've got all-in pricing, so you know exactly what you're paying for before you go to checkout. You get a view of your seat within the app so you know what you're getting for your money, and it's an easy process. You can check out in as few as 2 taps. Also, Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, which will help you filter out all of anything that's not an incredible deal. So at least when you're looking within any specific event, you're looking at the best opportunities to get seats for your money. You don't have to waste as much time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. It is an excellent experience. I want you guys to check it out. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code HOOPS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code HOOPS. That's HOOPS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's talk some basketball. So, 8 different teams were hitting with Media Day quotes. I wanted to start with the Golden State Warriors. So there's 2 different things I want to hit on. Both actually involve Draymond. The first was Draymond and what Kyle Anderson said Draymond has been saying to him behind the scenes, which is that Kyle Anderson is a 5 now, meaning at the center position. So there was a little bit of a hoopla there from Warriors fans stemming around the fact that they kind of view themselves as too small at this point, and the idea of Kyle Anderson playing center not being a great idea, right? Now, it remains to be seen how often Kyle Anderson will actually play center. I didn't interpret that as like, oh, Kyle Anderson is going to be playing the majority of his minutes at center. I think Trayce Jackson-Davis is going to play a lot of center. I think Kevon Looney is going to play a lot of center. Draymond Green obviously is going to play a lot of center. I would imagine all 3 of those guys will play a lot more center than Kyle Anderson. I looked at it more as like the way that I've always viewed Golden State's offensive system is basically 3 guys who run action and 2 guys that are dribble handoff fulcrums or screening fulcrums from the perimeter. This is a kind of a concept within 5 out that we talk a lot about, right? Like if you imagine, let's say on the strong side of the floor, in years past, you got, let's say it's Klay Thompson, but actually let's just look forward to this year. So let's say it's Steph coming out of the corner and you've got, let's say, Andrew Wiggins screening down for him as Steph comes off into a dribble handoff with Draymond, right? What ends up happening is Draymond throws the dribble handoff, then he kind of rolls into open space, right? But if Steph comes off that action and nothing's open, like he can't get a 3, he's not getting downhill into the lane, or maybe he gets a little bit downhill but doesn't get too much in the way of dribble penetration, Draymond's rolling, he's not open. The next read there, Kyle Anderson, in this case, the second big, would be flashing to the high post so that he can catch a swing pass from Steph and then flow into a dribble handoff on the other side of the floor, right? And it's going to work back and forth. And this has been basically what the Warriors have done offensively for years, whether it's Draymond and Kevon Looney, whether it's Draymond and Andrew Bogut, whether it's Draymond and JaVale McGee, whether it's Draymond even with Andre Iguodala out there sometimes back in the day, right? So like this is Golden State's system is kind of typically built around two non-shooters who are more dribble handoff fulcrums, and then three guys that are typically more aggressive shooters that are looking to score coming off of these actions. So the way I interpreted that is like, yeah, Kyle Anderson, guess what? Like, you're slotting into, when you're playing next to Draymond, what Kevon Looney did, what Trayce Jackson-Davis did, what Andrew Bogut did, which is functioning as a center on offense. That was more the way that I looked at it. That said, I do think that Kyle Anderson will see some minutes at the 5, and it's something that he's done periodically through his career and done a good job of. Why? He's a very vocal communicator on defense and just in general, very smart defensive player. And so, like, if he's calling out coverages and dictating when to help or when to stay home, he's typically pretty good at that sort of thing. He's a good rebounder for his position. Kyle Anderson's just a good basketball player. And so, like, I didn't read too much into that. I think, like, trust me, guys, like, the Warriors are still going to be looking if they can see a decent option to upgrade somebody at the center position. I still think you're going to see a lot of Trayce Jackson-Davis. I still think you're going to see a lot of Kevon Looney. There's a rumor that Trayce Jackson-Davis has grown an inch that came out of camp. Now, I shouldn't say rumor, it was directly mentioned in interviews, but like, you always got to take some of that stuff with a grain of salt. Like, I lost a bunch of weight, or I gained a bunch of weight, or I got taller, like all that kind of stuff. I'm always a little bit skeptical of, but like, I'm not necessarily worried about the center position as much for the Golden State Warriors as I am just who's going to be the primary the secondary shot creator whenever Steph's not trying to create offense. That's really where I see issues on this particular team. But I'm not worried about Kyle Anderson and his fit. And he does function as a center in the offensive system that Golden State wants to run. The second thing was that heated interaction that Draymond had with that reporter. And basically, I'm not going to get too far into it. Basically, the reporter was kind of beating around the bush to confront Draymond on the idea of his availability, which has been not related to injury. It's been related to his behavior, right? And like last year, it was an issue. Draymond missing as much time as he did, it hurt the basketball team. And so Draymond got kind of defensive and got a little snippy with the reporter. Some of this, I think athletes struggle to understand, like that's his job. Like that specifically is that reporter's job. Now, do some reporters go too far in the way that they try to manipulate questions or try to bait guys into saying something? Yeah, you're right about that. But at the end of the day, if in the same way that my job is to break down games and give my opinions on the teams, for those beat reporters, in many cases, they're going into that. Like they're going into that press conference with the job of trying to get a quote. Okay. And typically they're going to try to get quotes that are centered around the biggest stories of the team. And like it or not, one of the stories surrounding the Golden State Warriors in the last year was Draymond's availability, in large part because of his inability to control his emotions when he's on the floor. And so in Draymond's response, he was like, I'm here. I've been here for 13 years now. I've been here pretty much every night for 13 years. And you're right. For the most part, over the course of his career, he has been available. But in big spots, he's been unavailable, right? 2016, makes himself unavailable for Game 5 of the NBA Finals. Obviously, last year, misses substantial chunks of time. And so my thing is it's fair, Draymond, for reporters and for your teammates and for coaching people in the coaching staff to be like, hey, dude, are you going to be professional on a night in and night out basis this year so we don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to be available to play? I think it's a reasonable question. This isn't I can't remember what her name is, the female reporter who questioned DeJounte Carrington about a celebration that she had with one of her teammates and trying to insinuate that it was mimicking her poking Caitlin Clark in the eye, which in addition to just being wrong was a blatant false attempt to try to bait DeJounte Carrington into saying something that was damaging. That to me is cross the line, right? But questioning Draymond on his ability to be available for his team, I think is completely fair. And quite frankly, he should have expected as he went into that press conference that was something that was going to be asked of him. And you know what? It wouldn't hurt to just sit there and be like, yeah, you know what? I let my team down last year. This year, it's not going to happen. You guys can count on me. Boom. End of story. There's a quote for you. It's a quote that everyone takes to the article, and it makes you look like a self-aware and dedicated teammate. So I was a little disappointed in that. But at the end of the day, I do think Draymond gets it, even if that interaction with the reporter was a little nasty. I do think Draymond gets it. I think he knows that he can't do what he did last year, that this team isn't talented enough to compete when he's not there. Moving on to the Philadelphia 76ers. A quote from Joel Embiid. I think Daryl will tell you this. As soon as we lost last year, I texted him. Embiid said, I was like, we got to do whatever it takes to make sure I'm in the postseason healthy. This year, there's no agenda, no all-star, there's no all-NBA, there's none of that. There's whatever it takes to make sure that I get to that point and that I'm ready to go. Embiid also insinuated that he has lost somewhere between 25 and 30 pounds. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the weight loss, the weight gain, the I put on muscle, the I grew taller stuff, I'm always a little bit skeptical of that. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that this is Embiid's approach, that he's improved his physical conditioning, and that his order of operations in terms of what he views as important within this season is just simply get to the postseason healthy rather than pursuing regular season accolades. That's exactly what their approach should be. The team is built in a way that kind of managed that, right? Like Andre Drummond is one of the better backup center options that you have in the league. He's a guy that could certainly start 30, 40 games at center if you needed him to. You've got tons of shot creation with Paul George and Tyrese Maxey. You hit on some veteran minimum signings that I liked. That team is built to be able to withstand Embiid missing games and for them to float around 500, which is all you really need in the Eastern Conference to be a team that's above the play-in. And so if that's the approach and they combine that with Embiid being in better physical conditioning from the start, I think that makes it more likely that he is ready to go when he gets to the postseason. And there's everything's theoretical with Embiid. Like Embiid's always struggled in the postseason, but it's been a combination of injuries and some of his shortcomings in his approach, right? Relying on the jump shot, relying on foul grifting, right? Not having too much of a physical aggressive play towards the basket, right? And it's not any one thing or the other. Like, I do believe that Embiid has consistently dealt with injuries and that would certainly be a benefit to him if he could get to April and be ready to rock and roll, right? But the flip side of that is there are some legitimate shortcomings for him in the postseason. But step one is he's got to get there healthy. And that's something that we haven't seen in the last couple of years. So I did think that was an encouraging sign of Philly's approach coming into the season, even if it was the obvious direction that they needed to go. TD Tutty taking it to the house, in for 6, whatever you call a touchdown. One thing's for sure. Touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, from the special teams or defense, we don't care how they score them. We want to bet on touchdowns, and DraftKings Sportsbook is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown or how many TDs will be in a game. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. The game I have my eye on this week is Ravens-Cowboys. I think both teams need that game badly. I'm a Cowboys fan too. Very predictable start to the season for the Cowboys, but I'm really, really excited for this weekend. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. You know, whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. That's the reason the Toyota Camry has been America's best-selling sedan for the past 22 years. And the all-new Camry takes it to a new level. With a 4-mode drive switch, you're in total control of your ride. I mean, there are Hall of Fame point guards who don't have this level of control. And the Camry's got flash to match. We're talking available 19-inch multi-spoke alloy wheels and chrome dual-tipped exhaust. I mean, this is a seriously good-looking car. And the all-new Camry's got the comfort to go with the looks. Standard dual-tone automatic climate control will have you and your passengers right in their comfort zone. This is the complete package. There are no weaknesses in the Camry's game. You don't see that often on the court or on the road. And because every all-new Camry is a hybrid, it has difference-making fuel efficiency with up to an EPA estimated 51 miles per gallon combined. Whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. Learn more at toyota.com/Camry. On the Lakers front, there was kind of a weird, a bunch of interesting stuff. I wanted to talk a little bit about D'Angelo Russell off the top, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other quotes that we saw. So a quote from D'Lo. I think for me, honestly, I think I really wanted to apologize in the sense of showing a lack of professionalism at times. showing a lack of team first perception at times. So for me, I think just kind of keeping that maturity and that professionalism throughout the year, no matter the ups and downs. I guess I appreciate that D'Lo wants to be better, but like I didn't think a lack of professionalism was an issue for D'Lo last year. Like I thought, you know, I said before the season last year, and I was wrong, but I said before the season last year, I thought the safest bet in the NBA was that D'Lo would get traded. I just, and like, I still feel like a D'Lo trade is coming down the pipeline simply because he's not a part of the big picture for the Lakers. He's a large expiring salary, but most importantly, him and Austin are redundant. It's a matter of like, you need to pair Austin with somebody that actually complements his skill set more than he actually does. It's a lot of people talk about the, I have comments still to this day from people like, why are you so down on D'Lo? Why are you so down on D'Lo? My opinion of D'Lo has skyrocketed since he joined the Lakers. I think that he has major shortcomings that consistently show up in the postseason? Yeah, but the dude is a good leader. He absolutely handled it with professionalism last year. As I said, I said it was a safe bet that he got traded all year long. He was in trade rumors. And he kind of just handled that like a champ and just handled it like a professional. So, like, I didn't see that as being an issue. And then as far as D'Lo as a player, I still think he's a very, very good regular season player, a very useful regular season player. Spaces the floor, can run action, can kind of be an offensive hub for stretches if you want. In general, just a very, very good off-ball player with with a knack for like screening and cutting and slipping and all those little different read and react things that make a good basketball player. My opinion of D'Lo has skyrocketed. And as far as the trade thing goes, I don't even necessarily think D'Lo needs to be traded this year. I just think his spot or Rui's spot needs a massive upgrade. Like if one of those two becomes a supreme athlete who can play on both ends of the floor, that makes the Lakers demonstrably better. So if it's like Austin, D'Lo, and then a massive upgrade at the 3 in the LeBron and AD, I think that can work. If it's Austin, Rui, LeBron and AD, and then a massive upgrade of D'Lo's spot, I think that could work. But like all of my talk about trading D'Lo has nothing to do with who D'Lo is as a player. It has everything to do with just finding more roster balance within the Lakers. I am a huge fan of D'Lo. I'm excited to watch him this year. He's a big part of why I'm optimistic about the Lakers to start this season. I think the Lakers are going to be a good team right away this year, and a big part of that is the continuity and the offensive firepower, of which a big chunk is D'Angelo Russell. Do I have issues with them as a potential team that could win 4 playoff rounds? Yeah, and one of the pathways to fix that is via D'Lo, but I don't think he needs to apologize. I don't think he needs to do anything different. If he came out and had the exact same season he had last year, I would be pleased. Obviously, it would help for him to be a little bit better on the defensive end, a little bit more attentive, fewer mistakes, and I think he will have a better defensive season on the strength of some of the structure that JJ Redick is putting in. But like, I thought D'Lo was a little too hard on himself with the way that he approached that specific concept. A couple other just notes from Laker Media Day. There's a lot of positivity coming around just the vibes. Jovan Buha, you guys know, he comes on the show quite a bit. We're actually looking at potentially having him back on here in the next couple of weeks. But Jovan, as an example, said that he's been covering the team for 5 years and that it was the best like kind of vibes and positivity that he had seen in his time covering the team. That's encouraging, right? A lot of talk about structure, a lot of talk about systems being put in, a lot of talks about productivity in their practice approach, a lot of talk about emphasizing shooting more threes, a lot of really encouraging stuff out of Lakers camp. I'm really, really excited to watch that team start playing some games. The Celtics, Jayson Tatum had an interesting quote. He said, I just always feel like overall I can still get better. You haven't seen the best version of Jayson Tatum, and you shouldn't, right? I'm only 26. I should continue to keep getting better. I 100% agree with him. I generally am of the opinion that a basketball player hits their peak between age 30 and 32. I think that's the sweet spot where like their physical gifts are still like 95% of what they were when they were young, but they have a decade of experience playing professional basketball. And now just their overall understanding of like how to read and react at the NBA level, little details about how to win basketball games, all of the ups and downs of losing to a team that's a bad matchup or experiencing the highs and the lows. I talk about that scar tissue of losing, like Tatum's just seen so much already, all the big games that he's been in. And I think Tatum will hit his ceiling a little earlier just because he's been playing in really big games for so long. So for Tatum, it's probably more like 28 to 30. But I do think there's a better version of Jayson Tatum in there. There's a Jayson Tatum in there that takes fewer bad shots. I think Jayson Tatum has clearly made a commitment to becoming a good pull-up shooter. He is not a good pull-up shooter, but eventually, just by process of repetition, there's a good chance that by the time he's 28 to 30, that eventually he'll come around and at least become a little bit better. Will he ever become the type of pull-up shooter that some of his small forward peers around the league are? I don't know. Probably not. But like, he certainly will be able to come. I think there's still a considerable amount of improvement that he can show there just by virtue of the fact that he's working so hard at it. Like, he's working hard at it. He's taking so many every single game. The repetition will eventually lead to improvement. And then just again, like by age 28, age 30, he's going to have a decade of NBA experience, and just he's going to have been in so many wars. Hell, he's already been in so many wars. I do think Jayson Tatum will be a better basketball player in the next, 3-4 years. Will he ever be the best player in the league? I don't think that is really in the potential outcome for him. I think the players at the top are they have like just these true superpowers that kind of reach a level that Tatum can't reach. But I do think that Jayson Tatum will continue to improve over the next several years. And that is scary for a Boston Celtics team that I believe has by far the most talent in the NBA. Denver Nuggets. A lot of interesting stuff surrounding Russell Westbrook. Mike Malone had some quotes. He said, Russ was in the gym yesterday and there was just a different energy. I can't explain it. His voice, his leadership, his competitive spirit are all things that are not only going to help this team, but they're really going to help individual players achieve their potential and push them to be the best that they can be. I love that he's here. I love guys that bring it every single night. And that's what he's done every single game he's ever played. Jokic said, I know who he is a little bit outside of the court. Great teammate, vocal leadership, the guy you want to listen to, the leader you want to follow in the gym. So I have two additional Westbrook kind of topics that I want to get to. But before we move forward, I want to just touch on these really quick. This is the energy piece is always the thing that people are initially drawn to with Russ. And anybody who's actually covered Russ very closely or rooted for him on a team that he was actually playing for, that like Russ does every single night have moments where he gets very emotionally worked up and brings a lot of energy. And so that consistency can lead to a reputation of being a guy who plays hard every single game that he's played in, right? Like Mike Malone said. But the issue with Russ isn't about whether or not he can get to that level every night. It's whether or not he can get to that level every possession. Russ has a tendency to float on defense off the ball. He'll kind of drift into the paint to hunt defensive rebounds, consistently loses track of shooters, consistently falls asleep within the game plan discipline. And it can be damaging because there are always there will be dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of highlights this year, I should say lowlights, of Russell Westbrook where he's standing out of a defensive stance, not paying attention, and a dude just swoops right behind him and gets an offensive rebound, or back cuts him for a layup, or he's guarding the ball and he just isn't paying attention and the guy just drives right around him, or just in general, a lack of attention to detail. We're going to talk about Russ's defense in a minute. Russ is still, when he's trying, not just a good point of attack defender, like a devastatingly good point of attack defender. And that's the real upside here. We're going to get to that in a minute. But in terms of this idea of I'm just trying to warn Denver fans, if you're under the impression that Russ is going to play hard every single possession and avoid mistakes, that is not who he is. It just never has been. He is a guy that brings emotion every night that comes in waves, but he has actually really poor possession to possession focus, and it will drive you crazy. I'm just saying that from experience. Talk to Clippers fans, they'll say the same thing. Talk to Rockets fans, they'll say the same thing. Talk to Thunder fans, they'll say the same thing. Talk to Wizards fans, they'll tell you the same thing. It's a consistent thing, and he's been in the league for so long now, I just don't see it as something that he's going to dramatically change at this point in his career. A specific quote from Westbrook, talking about previous teams. To be honest, it was unique. They just didn't put me in position to make it unique. I was in a position where I was not playing my position. being able to be here and Coach Malone allowing me to be able to use my speed, use my transition skill to be able to make other guys better, makes the game easy for everybody surrounding me. And that's what I love to do best. The idea that the Lakers and Clippers didn't give Russell Westbrook opportunities to be Russell Westbrook is completely asinine. Both teams at extended stretches gave Russ the keys. Both teams also asked Russ to do things off the ball. Those were a struggle. The on-ball reps with Russ are a mixed bag. You'll have stretches where it looks great. You'll have games where it looks great. But in the large sample, there's just as many mistakes as there are productive plays, and it doesn't really net out to a quality offensive hub. Not at this point in his career. He's lost a little bit of a step. His rim finishing is atrocious, and he can't shoot the basketball. He's a very gifted playmaker still at this point in his career, and you will have stretches where it looks really good. But the idea that the Lakers and Clippers didn't give Russ an opportunity is completely asinine. He will be asked to do the exact same stuff with Denver that he was asked to do with the Lakers and Clippers, and his success and efficiency in those situations, I expect to look roughly the same. So let's look at one other quote, and let's talk a little bit about the upside with Russell Westbrook. Mike Malone said, "It's funny. I think when people talk about Russell Westbrook, no one really mentions defense. When we went back and watched as a staff his defense last year with the Clippers, end of games, he was on the opposing team's best player every night. So you have a guy that you can close games with. You have a guy that you can close games with, Russell Westbrook, who knows the league, knows personnel, and has the respect of officials, and has competitive, I'm going to get in your shit mindset that I love." So again, as we talked about, it's all about making sure that Russ is on the right type of matchup. Russ, at this point in his career, is still a devastatingly good on-ball defender, especially against players that have athletic traits, because he's got really quick feet, and he's got a low center of gravity, and he's super strong. So he will beat you to spots and disrupt your base as well as anybody in the league. He's excellent guarding forwards. He's excellent in his back pressure. To Mike Malone's point, when I watch Russ's playoff footage from both of the last 2 years with the Clippers, the on-ball defense is legitimately terrifyingly good. Like that is legitimately real. But everything I said about him off the ball is also real. His attention to detail within the defensive game plan, the lapses, they are damaging. And so if you asked me, like, what does it look like for Russell Westbrook within Denver for everything to work and to come together? It is about, on the offensive end, when he's playing with the starters, I want to kind of like shelve that for a second, okay? But it's about just within those bench units, when he gets handed the keys, making fewer mistakes, having the good plays outweigh the bad plays. And then on the defensive end of the floor, it's about unleashing him in an on-ball role. Because when he is on the ball, he makes fewer mistakes and he leverages his athletic gifts at a higher level. Russ takes it personal, and so he gets very, very focused on a possession-by-possession basis when he's on the ball. But if you put him on an off-ball role to track a shooter, that's where you're going to start to get some of the negative plays that come with Russell Westbrook. Let's zoom in on Russ with the starters, though, because this is the other thing. To Russ's point about playing his style and being allowed to be unique, you can't do that with the starters. When it's Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic and Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray, he's not going to be playing Russell Westbrook basketball. He's going to be slotting into the KCP role or the Christian Brown role, right? And in that specific role, it is so much about off-ball read and react, meaning screening for a guy like Michael Porter Jr. or screening for a guy like Jamal Murray, reading where the defenders are going and slipping to the basket. Over the course of the last 3 seasons with the Lakers and the Clippers, there was a lot of moments where Russ, when he was off the ball, teams were both of those teams, the Lakers and the Clippers, were trying and begging Russ to function more as an off-ball screener and cutter, and he simply would not do it. He didn't do it with the Lakers. He didn't do it with the Clippers. And so again, this is my last kind of thing on the Russell Westbrook stuff. There is a version of this that works. There is a version of this where Russ, with the core lineups, works hard as an off-ball screener and cutter, Makes sure that he only takes wide open corner threes instead of above the break threes and doesn't hunt them, but looks more to take really, really high quality ones. You focus him on an on-ball defensive role, and you get a positive outcome out of Russell Westbrook. But his personal history tells us that he doesn't want to do that stuff. And so let's just put it this way. If it work, and this is the one, I'm just saying this in defense of the Lakers and Clippers. If it does work out with Russell Westbrook this season in Denver, it will be because Russell Westbrook changed who he was as a basketball player and became more focused on the things that Denver specifically needed him to do. It is not because Denver finally unleashed Russ when the Lakers and the Clippers and the Rockets and all these other teams couldn't. That's not what it is. Both of those teams, like as much as you want to talk about Darvin Ham and some of his limitations as a coach, Ty Lue is one of the best coaches in the league. That team needed a point guard. And it still had all of the same issues that you saw with the Lakers. And I even thought it fit a little better with the Clippers than the Lakers because they needed his specific position group, but it still had all of those same specific issues. So again, maybe it works, but stop blaming everybody else for the issues that have perpetually plagued you over the course of the tail end of your career. Russ needs to change in order for things to work in Denver. We have 3 more teams. We'll hit them pretty quickly. The Milwaukee Bucks, quote from Lillard, when I look back at last year, I was just trying to get through the year. My teammates, my coaches, they're going to get the real version of me. I definitely feel more on the same page with him now than I did last year regarding Giannis. So that was one of the big stories from last year. Damian Lillard obviously going through a bunch of stuff in his personal life, substantial decreases in scoring volume and efficiency. Him getting back to form and looking like the real me, as he mentions, that would be a big swing factor for the Bucks. So hopefully those aren't just words, and that's the reality of what the Bucks get out of Dame this year. Several quotes about the Bucks being overlooked. Doc said, well, we all pay attention to it on the Bucks being overlooked in the East. Giannis said, I think we've always been overlooked. Look, here's the thing, guys. If you win 49 games in the weak Eastern Conference with Dame and Giannis both playing 73 games, it's going to affect the way teams project. Or I should say people in the fan bases, media, they're going to project you based on the basketball that they saw. And last year, you had plenty of opportunity to make sure that people didn't overlook you and you were a mediocre team. So, again, I understand why internally they may feel like they're better than their reputation. I think they're probably a little better than their reputation, but they don't have the pedigree with this group, not the past. They don't have the pedigree with this group in recent play to justify being lumped in with the top tier contenders in the NBA. Clippers. James Harden said, aggressive on his mentality entering this season. We tried last year to where I'm trying to figure out, guys, the roles. It was kind of difficult when you get that high caliber of players or Hall of Famers in basically the same position with everybody trying to figure out the roles. It was pretty difficult. But this year for me, I got a clear space on what I need to be doing on fitting in with Kawhi and Russ last year. I got a clear space on what I need to be doing. End quote. That was relating to his fit with Kawhi and Russ last year. I'm excited about having an opportunity to be who I am again. I'm going to tell you one thing. It is definitely going to involve a lot of me. Not just because I can create a shot and get guys involved. There's always going to be talk. There was talk when I was in Houston. When I was doing what I was doing, you can't win like that. You just seen a guy last season make it to the finals playing the exact same way that I play. So there is a way. Your team has to be constructed very well, and you've got to have a little bit of luck and make sure that you are healthy. So this is interesting because I actually see upside with this approach for the regular season. If you build the offense around James Harden and you have the type of perimeter defense personnel that the Clippers have and a rock solid starting center like Ivica Zubac, I think that they're going to win a lot of basketball games. I've said this before, but I think if they get just baseline health out of James Harden and Kawhi, even just 50 games out of Kawhi and 65 games out of James Harden, I think that they're going to stay out of the play. And I think that James Harden's just a really good kind of baseline offensive engine. And I think they're just a scrappy, athletic, young team on the perimeter. And I think that that's going to drive a lot for them, right? However, there's a huge difference between James Harden and Luka Doncic. And like, there is a reason why that the Harden style hasn't worked at the highest level of the NBA playoffs. And there's a reason why people say you can't win like that in respect to James Harden in a different way than they say with Luka Doncic. And this is a take that I've had many times on this show, but there's a huge difference between Luka and James Harden's attack. Luka has so much variety in his offensive attack and can score from so many different places on the floor with so many different types of shots that he has more resilience to different types of defenders and defensive coverages. James Harden is a step back jumper, almost always going to his right, or a hard dribble drive to the left, or a crossover to the right, an occasional floater, everything else is at the rim. It is nowhere near the level of variety that Luka has, and that is why James Harden has the reputation that he has. So, like, even though I was encouraged by that in the sense that that's the right way for the Clippers to go about this regular season in order to rack up wins and just pray that Kawhi's healthy come April, I thought it was also kind of an interesting little example of a lack of self-awareness for James Harden in realizing what makes him different from a guy like Luka Doncic. Last one, the Spurs. Greg Popovich talking about, there was kind of like a little bit of a difference between some of the ways the players were talking about their expectations versus the coaching staff. So Popovich says, our expectations are the same as they've been from the first year that I coached. We want to be the best possible team that we can be. That's individually as far as development goes. That's obviously been a big factor the last couple of years. Then team-wide, learning how to play and what it takes to win. So Popovich is a little bit more reserved, a little bit more talk about development, a little bit talk about this being a process. Devin Vassell said playoffs. That's it. That's all I see. And Chris Paul said, if I'm going to be away from my family, then I want it to be meaningful. I want to play and compete. This was the best opportunity to do that, and I feel like this would be the best fit. So I don't read too much into the Popovich comments because I think he's just being realistic, and I obviously think that Greg Popovich's approach is going to be to try to win every single game. As far as the overall idea about like the Spurs and going for it at this phase, I never think there's a bad reason to try to win every game. Like, can you potentially stunt development to some degree when you don't give guys opportunities, even though it might not be the best thing for the team? Yeah, there's some diminishing returns that you can get there. However, the counter is you have to account for the fact that like actually playing winning basketball, actually teaching young players winning concepts and everything built around the idea of like a hatred of losing and losing attitudes and losing behaviors being unacceptable, to me, is a rock solid foundation to build an organization on. And so like, even if the Spurs internally don't think that they have championship potential, approaching it as though that you're going to try to make a playoff run is the right way to go because it's about character building. And when you're in this kind of like fledgling state of a franchise as you're getting ready to move into an era of contention with Victor Wembanyama, it's very important. It's very important for you to build that character in this particular phase. All right, let's get into our season preview for the Minnesota Timberwolves. So they lost Kyle Anderson, Jordan McLaughlin, Monty Morris, and Karl Anthony Towns. They added Rob Dillingham, who's a scoring guard that they got with the 8th overall pick, Joe Ingles, Dante DiVincenzo, and Julius Randle as the returns in the Karl Anthony Towns trade. I also found out that Keita Bates-Diop is coming over as well, a guy that I'm not sure will play that much, but he does play at the forward position, which is probably the area that they're least deep. So there's some value there, but I'm not sure how much of an NBA rotation player he is. Let's take a look at the Cat trade real quick. So as I talked about a little bit on the Monday show, I understand why they did it. Julius Randle has a player option after this year for $31 million that he will most likely decline and try to work out some sort of long-term deal, a new deal, right? Karl Anthony Towns has a $61 million player option in 2027 that he will almost certainly pick up. So Cat's contract is 3 additional years longer and almost twice as expensive. That is just really difficult to deal with financially, right? Dante DiVincenzo at $12 million a year is just a more manageable salary as well to work with. So there's substantially more financial flexibility in the next few years after this deal. Let's look at the payroll real quick. Even without Karl Anthony Towns, if Gobert picks up his player option, that's $47 million on the books next year. If he doesn't pick up the player option and you re-sign him, judging by what Jared Allen got this summer and what Isaiah Hartenstein got this summer, Isaiah Hartenstein got almost $30 million. Jared Allen got more than $30 million. Rudy Gobert, even I personally would rather have Jared Allen as my center than Rudy Gobert, but because he's just more functional as an offensive piece. But like Rudy Gobert, in terms of reputation, is considered by many to be a better player than both of those guys. So you're looking at like $35 million to $40 million a year in some sort of 4-year deal for Rudy Gobert after this season. So like that's expensive. Anthony Edwards makes $46 million next year. Jaden McDaniels makes $25 million next year. Mike Conley is on the books for $10 million next year. Naz Reid is due a new deal. So it was a sacrifice. You sacrificed a chance to run it back with a Western Conference Finals team and a young superstar that will improve year over year for long-term flexibility. I personally don't like the Julius Randle fit. We'll go into more detail about that later. But most star trades don't bring back a star. So to get real long-term flexibility comparatively to your other situation, also have the potential upside. Again, I don't like the fit, but there's potential upside because he's a star of Julius Randle. And then depth with Dante DiVincenzo. If there was some sort of directive from ownership to shed money, get out of the second apron, build long-term flexibility, if that was a directive from ownership, this is about as good as you can do because you got a star back, you got a depth piece back, and you built in that flexibility. So even if we don't necessarily like the fit of the star, if you were in the same position where you were asked to trade a star for financial flexibility, it's difficult to do much better than Tim Connolly did, right? So now from that perspective, let's look at the basketball. So Julius Randle, the upside is what he can do on the ball. And I told you guys, I promised I'd get into more detail in the season preview. So let's talk a little bit about some of these specifics with Julius Randle on the ball. The last time Julius Randle was healthy for a whole season was 2023. He played 77 games. He averaged 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists on 58% true shooting, which is obviously very good. He made the All-Star team, and he was third-team All-NBA. He was also an efficient, high-volume shot creator. Over a point per possession on pick and rolls, ISOs, and post-ups, including passes. To give you an example of the difference in volume and efficiency, Karl Anthony Towns ran 524 pick and rolls, ISOs, and post-ups last year for 513 points, including passes. That's just 0.98 points per possession. Julius Randle, in that 2023 season, ran 996 pick and rolls, ISOs, and post-ups, including passes. Got 1,038 points, which is 1.04 points per possession. So Julius, in his last healthy season, basically did twice the volume of shot creation that Cat did last year and was considerably more efficient. So like Julius is just a much better on-ball shot creator than Karl Anthony Towns is. He's a deadly face-up player. On like face-up jab step jump shots, he got over a point per possession. He shot 64% at the rim. He shot 56% on floaters and hooks. He's got like a really efficient little left shoulder fade when he's posting up on that left block and he kind of gets into the middle of the floor. And that specific type of on-ball shot creation beyond Ant is something that Minnesota didn't have last year. And it's a big part of why they struggled offensively. If you look at the numbers, when Ant was on the floor, the Timberwolves had a 118 offensive rating. That's very good. It's not elite. It's not like the best teams in the league, but it's very good. When Ant was off the floor, they had a 111.4 offensive rating. That's very bad. So improved secondary shot creator, an improved secondary shot creator like Julius Randle will, one, give you a better chance of scoring when Ant's off the floor, and will, two, when Ant is off the ball, give you a better opportunity to create quality shots. So like, I think Julius, too, in two-man game, like, he's not going to be the pick and pop player that Cat was, but when they face any sort of switching, Julius is a better matchup attacker in terms of using his size to bully smaller defenders. I like that fit in terms of Julius as an on-ball creator. The downside of this particular fit is when Ant has the ball. Last year, even with Cat in the lineup, the Wolves struggled to space the floor for Ant. Jaden McDaniels converted spot-up possessions at just 0.99 points per possession. Teams were comfortable helping off of Jaden and just throwing a late closeout at him. Rudy Gobert, as I've said so many times on the show, everyone talks about him on the defensive end of the floor and low lights of him getting scored on in isolation. That's not the issue with Rudy. I still think he's an awesome defensive player. The issue with Rudy is he basically has to be completely open to finish around the basket. Anything that's in traffic, he's so bad at catching and finishing surrounded by bodies in the middle of the floor. That's the real reason Rudy deserves criticism. That's the real reason that France benched him with the Olympics. That's the real reason why at stretches it seems like, oh man, like this doesn't work offensively with Rudy on the floor. It comes down to him being able to catch and finish in traffic. And so with Jaden, Cat, and Rudy, it already was kind of janky. Now you're subbing out Cat for Julius Randle, and he's just not a good off-ball player on the offensive end of the floor. His spot-up efficiency has been way below average basically every season of his career. He did peak in the 2023 season at 1.07 points per possession, which is slightly above average, but he dipped right back down to the 33rd percentile last year, just 0.93 points per possession. And in all of the previous seasons, he was well below a point per possession. So he's not a good spot-up guy. He's basically a 1 point per possession catch and shoot guy. He shoots about 38% when he's unguarded on jump shots, but he shoots poorly when he's guarded. He scores on a cut maybe once every 2 games. He's in the 25th percentile for frequency, so he's never been a high volume cutter. He did some pick and popping with Brunson. He had a decent pick and pop season in 2023, but it wasn't as effective last year. So like there's some issues there with how you can make use of Julius Randle off the ball. It's not going to be easy for Anthony Edwards. His development as a pull-up shooter, which really came to the surface in the postseason last year, that's going to be huge for this team's potential. And hopefully that translates forward into this season. But again, like that fits specifically having Jaden, Julius, and Rudy all on the floor at the same time. That could be an absolute disaster for spacing. And so I'm a little bit concerned about that. Health is also an issue for Julius. He's a rhythm player, so when he gets out of the lineup for a while, it takes some time to get back to form. In addition to missing a bunch of time this year, if you go back to the previous year, he missed some time right before the playoffs, and then when he came back, he just didn't look like Julius Randle. He looked really bad. But then at the same time, I don't really view that as a factor in this trade because Karl Anthony Towns has a lot of the same health question marks that Julius Randle did. Dante DiVincenzo, I think he's just a rock-solid starting NBA guard. And he may not even start on this particular team. He's a very good athlete at the guard position. He's 6'4", he's strong, he runs and jumps well. He's a very good on-ball defender. He's got a great motor. He always plays hard. He gets good physical ball pressure on the ball handler. And then he turned into one of the best shooters in the league. He shot over 40% on 9 3-point attempts per game last year. He was one of only 3 players in the entire NBA to attempt at least 8 threes per game and to hit at least 40% of them. Him, Steph Curry, and CJ McCollum. He converted spot-up possessions at 1.23 points per possession. 37 players in the NBA logged at least 300 spot-up possessions. Dante ranked 4th on that list. He's just a very, very good offensive off-ball guard. He's an absolute gamer, plays both ends of the floor, plays hard, leverages athletic gifts. I think Wolves fans are going to love him. I think he's a better player than Nickeil Alexander-Walker, for instance. Like, I think that's a legitimate upgrade. So, in summary, looking at the trade, very rarely can you trade a star and get a star back while also getting a legit depth piece and get the financial flexibility. Like, if you are under this directive, it's about as good as you can do. My concerns about this trade mostly center around fit. Again, Cat is a much better offensive fit with Anthony Edwards off the ball, but there is upside to the Randle fit with his on-ball creation, right? And you add that starting two-way caliber guard in starting caliber two-way guard in Dante DiVincenzo, right? So like, it's about as I would have preferred if the Timberwolves ran it back, because you got a really bad matchup in the conference finals. Anthony Edwards is ascending. You've got this beautiful front court to fight against the Nikola Jokic problem. I would have preferred if they run it back, and I'm sure some Wolves fans feel the same. But I understand why they did it. And they did about as good a job of doing it as you could do under that type of directive. Let's talk about Ant's development, because this is a huge piece of the Wolves this year. The postseason leap last year was real. He entered into that like bona fide top tier superstar territory in the playoff run. He averaged 28, 7, and 7 on 60% true shooting, which is insane. Took his team to the Western Conference Finals. Really special stuff, right? What facilitated that rise? It was a combination of jump shooting and playmaking. He took 7 threes a game in the playoffs and made 40% of them. He shot 43% on pull-up jump shots, getting 1.08 points per shot, which is great. Did a really nice job, though, in the playmaking front, driving and kicking to generate advantage opportunities for a season. Averaging 6.5 assists per game in a playoff run that's 3 rounds long. That's a legitimate playmaking leap from Anthony Edwards. Now, the question is, how much of that was real? I believe most of it was. But the reality is they're going to need it to be real. Teams are going to consistently pack the paint on him and force him to hit shots over the top of the defense. That's going to be an important counter for him. So that jump shot development, that being real, goes a long way to confronting some of the spacing issues, because this is a clunky fit. It's going to be a challenging season for Ant on the offensive end of the floor. How much is he up to that challenge? Because if he can overcome a lot of that, that's where you can get the upside of Julius Randle when he's on the ball. And I'm not worried about Ant off the ball at all. He's just turned into too good of a shooter at this point. I have one last little kind of like point that I want to hit before we get into more of a big picture summary. The backup forward spot. The Wolves bench got better with the addition of Donte DiVincenzo. You're actually really deep at bench guard, right? Like even Nickeil Alexander-Walker, you have Donte DiVincenzo. Rob Dillingham, he's a top 10 pick, so you got to find minutes for him there, right? You actually have 5 guards in the rotation. That's something that I think will be interesting to watch the rest of the season. You have an excellent backup center. Naz Reid's about as good as you can do in the backup center position in the NBA. But with the loss of Kyle Anderson, you're now looking at Joe Ingles, Luka Garza, and Keita Bates-Diop basically as your backup forwards. And none of those are great options, right? So, like, I think the initial setup is fine. I think having Jaden McDaniels, Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid, I think you got enough there to fill most of the front court minutes. It's more of a depth issue. If one of those 4 guys goes down with injury, that's where you could be looking at 20 plus minutes a night for guys like Joe Ingles, Luka Garza, Keita Bates-Diop. That's where it could get a little bit tricky, right? So there's 2 ways to confront that. One is a balancing trade. Like you have 5 guards that are all really good rotation players. If you could turn one of them, let's say the worst one, like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, if you could turn him into a forward, that balances things a little bit, right? Another direction they could go is look to build out some 3-guard looks. Donte plays bigger than he is. He rebounds really well for a guard, and he's strong and has a good like center of gravity, so he could slide his feet well. So like, I think you could like kind of account for the fact that he plays a little bigger than he is. And then Anthony Edwards is one of the most physically imposing guards in the league. So like, I actually think an Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, Donte DiVincenzo lineup with Gobert and one of Julius Randle or Jaden McDaniels could work. So like, keep an eye on the backup forward spot, but one of the ways they could confront that outside of a trade is just trying to build out some more 3-guard looks. All right, last segment. Why don't you have Minnesota with the top tier contenders? I have Minnesota in the if things go right tier. I'm a huge Ant fan. I'm rooting for this team to succeed. So this is not about any sort of like personal vendetta. I actually really like Anthony Edwards. I think he might be my favorite player of this next era, right? But they have some gaping holes and specific matchup weaknesses that could get them beat. Specifically, teams that do a really good job of protecting the rim. We saw this in the Dallas series, right? In the Denver series, Anthony Edwards attempted 7.1 restricted area shots per game and shot 74% there. In the Dallas series, he attempted just 5.8 restricted area shots per game and shot just 55% there. So going from a guy who was having a bad rim protection postseason run in Jokic to legit rim protection in Gafford and Lively completely changed Minnesota's ability to get into the basket, specifically with Ant. But it also extended into the regular season. The top 8 opponent points in the paint team, so let's call that rim protection teams. The top 8 rim protection teams, not counting Minnesota in the league, were the Chicago Bulls, the Miami Heat, Cleveland Cavaliers, the New Orleans Pelicans, the New York Knicks, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Orlando Magic, and the Boston Celtics. The Timberwolves went 10-10 against that group, and they went 46-16 against everyone else. So that's like a pretty substantial sample size that demonstrates that the teams that can really pack the paint and protect the rim are going to bog down this Minnesota offense and cause them to be vulnerable in a real way. So like now we can kind of exacerbate that concept by swapping in Julius Randle for Karl Anthony Towns. So like that to me is like a legitimate matchup weakness that could get them into some trouble. There are like, if they run into teams that can really protect the rim, they could end up getting beat in the playoffs. Teams that I look at there, like if they face Dallas again, I think they'd lose. If they face Oklahoma City, I think they'd lose. Even some of the lower teams in the West, like a team like the Lakers that has Anthony Davis on that front line, that's a team that could really pack the paint against Minnesota and cause some issues for their defense. The Lakers struggle to guard on the perimeter, but they have guys in Minnesota that don't necessarily need to be accounted for on the perimeter that they can stash bad defensive players on. So like, I think that's a significant weakness. The second big weakness that I want to talk about is trapping Ant. This was something we saw towards the tail end of the Denver series and then a lot in the Dallas series. It's copycat league, right? Denver showed it. Dallas copied it and kind of perfected it with rim protection. Ant got blitzed in ball screens 22 times in the playoffs. The Wolves scored just 10 points on those possessions, and they shot just 3 for 16 from the field. It is a copycat league. Teams will, all of the good coaching staffs in the league, when they're game planning for Minnesota, will watch that footage and go, man, just put 2 on Ant. There's nothing they can do. So what is your game plan for that? I'm a huge believer in their defense. Yes, they struggled in the Luka matchup, but there's really only a small handful of guys in the league that can really make Luka uncomfortable. But there are a lot of ways that this offense can be really bogged down by packing the paint, by trapping Ant in his ball screens, and it could potentially be worse now that Cat is gone. And so, like, that's something that they got to have a game plan for. Whether that's aligning things so that you have a good playmaker as the first read for Ant when he gets into the trap, whether that's just a lot of internal improvement for guys like Jaden McDaniels, whether that's Julius Randle improving as a spot-up player. They've got to find a way to convert those 4-on-3s into easy shots because the book is out with Minnesota. Pack the paint, trap Ant, you can bog down their offense. So in summary, I think this team is built to win regular season games. They've got young, energetic talent. I think they will likely end up in the 3 or the 4 seed this year. But I think they need to catch some matchup luck in order to win 4 playoff rounds. As I mentioned earlier, there are some teams in the Western Conference that I think would just beat them because of their ability to protect the rim. So that puts them in the mix with all of these teams below the top tier for me. I'm not worried about Ant. I think he's ready to do this. I just think the rest of the roster has some holes that are tough to account for. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. We'll see for Friday. We might have some preseason reaction depending on what happens in that Denver-Boston game. If not, we will have another season preview as well as a mailbag. I will see you guys then.